Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Sorry about that. Before I get into some of the questions, I just want to define, if we could, what your role was in preparing your reports. I know you indicated that you examined some devices, you imaged the hard drive for the computers, correct?
Yes.
And then, did you do any substantive investigative work? Meaning, did you look at some of the files on the computers to determine whether or not they had any evidentiary value?
No, not extensively. My role in creating those reports was providing the information that the homicide investigators had asked for and prepared reports complete with that data.
And who gave you your, I guess, instructions on your tasks?
That would come from the various investigators that were assigned to that case from the homicide division.
So more than one?
Yes, there were.
We were talking about the, I think you labeled it as device number 4, which would be the E-machine, which was a desktop computer that was recovered from the residence of the victims, correct?
Yes.
All right. Now, in that report, or in that examination, you prepared a report, and essentially, we went over some of it on Thursday. Some of it was, you had it like an index number on your report, correct? Like for each individual site. Am I using the correct terminology?
For each item that was indicated under a specific area of interest, yes, there was an index number per item.
Okay. And the primary substance of that report was information on internet searches. Is that accurate?
There was information on both searches and visited websites.
Visited websites, internet activity.
Yes.
Okay. Was there any other work done on the E-machine? Meaning, did you go to files on the E-machine to determine whether there was any video files or photo files or document files, things of that nature?
Yes, I would have.
Okay. And that would be in your report as well?
In the specific report we're talking about, I don't believe they were included with that. The request that came to me at that time was specifically for the internet history and install applications.
Okay, so that's what I'm trying to determine. So for the E-machine, your report consists of internet-related activity. Would that be accurate?
That is accurate, yes.
And we don't have any information regarding other files, such as document files, things of that nature.
Not in that report.
Okay. Is there another report that you prepared that deals with the other types of files, whether they're video files, document files, photograph files, for the E-machine? Is that a report that's somewhere else?
I don't recall creating an additional report on that device.
So, for example, on device number 3 that you called device number 3, which was the Dell laptop computer, Inspirion computer,
Yes.
and you're familiar with that, correct?
Yes.
In that report, your report had, I hate to say, perhaps thousands of pages of, or thousands of entries of files other than internet-related search activity, correct?
Yes, it did.
Because you had images, you had video files, you had document files, email files, the whole gamut, correct? For the Dell Inspirion?
I don't remember specifically, but that is typically how we examine those devices.
And was it your understanding that the Dell was Summers' laptop computer, based on the name of the device?
I don't recall.
Do you have your report with you?
I don't.
Okay. What about the E-machine? Were you able to determine who was the primary user of that machine?
Not that I remember now.
So if I were to ask you for the e-machine, well, strike that. If I were to tell you that there's been testimony that the e-machine was primarily used by Joseph, would that be consistent with the internet activity that you saw?
You can object, assumes facts not in evidence.
So, for the e-machine, since you looked at the internet activity, and that's what your report consists of, let's talk about that internet activity. You testified that for this particular, for this machine, that there was some internet activity on February 8th. Is that accurate?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And were you able to determine what time that internet activity started?
I don't recall off the top of my head.
You don't have your report on that?
Unfortunately, I don't this morning.
Okay. Let's see if we can dig something up.
Take a look at some of these exhibits and then you can tell me whether or not any of those.
No, none of the items in front of me have a last access date of February 8th.
Take a look at those. I'm going to want to flip the pages on that one.
Yeah, pages 2, 3, and 4, I am seeing Google searches that were conducted on February 8th.
And if I could just, let me just, that would be Exhibit 827. So back to my question, would that be the report that would tell us what time that internet activity would have started on February 8th?
Yes.
Okay. So would you mind, and you don't remember what that was, correct, off the top of your head?
Not off the top of
Would it
my head.
refresh your memory to look at that document to see?
All of these records contain a last access time between 2:06 a.m. and 2:07 a.m.
Okay. So for about would it be fair to say then on February 8th, somebody is actually at that computer doing some internet activity that you described on Thursday, correct?
Yes.
And when I say somebody sitting at the computer, I mean, there's internet activity that is sometimes that the person doesn't have to do anything on the computer, just does it on its own. Virus scans, things of that nature, correct? The system will do it on its own.
Yes.
This is different because this is actually somebody sitting at the keyboard punching keys, correct?
These records would suggest that, yes.
Okay. So somebody is at the e-machine and they're punching in they're doing their search or whatever they're doing, and how long does that last based on that? Is it about 1.5 to 2 minutes, something of that nature?
Yes.
Okay. And these were some of the sites that you testified to on Thursday. And I think on direct examination, you named some of those sites. Is that correct? Am I using the right term, site? Because remember, the result, what we got when the actual name was punched in was search results, correct? You remember that?
I remember the conversation, yes.
Okay. So if we take a
On
look.
the searches we're looking at here,
Yes.
they all appear to have been searches conducted through Google.com.
Okay. So just to give the jury an idea of what's happening on the computer screen, when those searches are done for a particular, a name is put in, a search term, I would say, correct?
Yes.
All right. And I was kind of questioning you, and admittedly clumsily, questioning you as to what the user's actually doing when they're sitting at the computer. Because you can type out and spell words, or you can maybe go and click on a previous search, and it'll take you to the same place, correct?
Correct.
All right. Do you know how these searches were done?
No, I would not be able to
Okay.
make that determination.
Okay. And then I asked you whether or not, when the search was done, whether an actual, and I know I used the wrong term on this for sure, a website was accessed. And you indicated that what was accessed was search results, meaning a number of items actually came up on the computer screen, correct?
Yes.
And I believe there was about maybe 5 or 6 different terms that were searched for, correct?
Correct.
And that entire search process, or that entire 5 or 6 terms that were searched for, the entire time as we looked at it was about 1.5 to 2 minutes. Is that accurate?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Was there any other activity on February 8th on the E-machine that you're aware of? Meaning, when I say activity, user activity, somebody punching keys, sitting at the keyboard.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Now, there was another desktop as well, correct?
Yes, there was.
And that was a HP, Hewlett Packard.
Yes.
And do you know whether or not there was any user activity on the HP on February 8th?
I do not know.
On the HP computer, were you able to determine, based on the name of the computer and the items that you were able to locate on the HP, were you able to determine who the primary user was for that computer?
Even since I've been refreshing my memory for trial, most of the focus was on device 4, and I do not recall it.
I'm sorry, most of the focus was on what?
The focus was on device 4,
Thank you.
and I don't recall reviewing that.
I'm going to show you a portion of your report. And if you could tell me if this refreshes your memory as to device number 5, which is the Hewlett Packard, the HP.
I see that the user profile that was used at this time was HP administrator.
Okay, so what does that mean?
That would not indicate, that wouldn't suggest who was actually behind the keyboard.
So that could be system activity, is what you're saying? And I'm going to show you Exhibit 851, which is probably a better representation of that day.
Your Honor, I didn't get the answer to the last question.
Was there an answer to the last question?
No.
No.
I'm sorry, what was the last question?
Yes, if you could take a look at Exhibit 851 and tell me if you're able to determine through looking at that exhibit whether or not there was any user activity on the HP on February 8th.
No, there was a question before that as to what an HP administrator means.
Did the reporter read that? The last question where there was no answer. Only the last two questions.
The answer was, I see that a user profile that was used at this time was the HP administrator. Question, so what does that mean?
I would have to look at the individual profiles on the machine to be able to determine what the different profiles were created for.
Does 851, Exhibit 851 there that I gave you, would that help you? You can take it out of the little cover there if you think that'll be helpful. But in looking at that exhibit, would that give you some further direction as to whether or not on the HP there was internet user activity on the HP?
It would suggest there was activity, yes.
And what is the time of that? I think we were using the term last accessed or something like that, correct?
Correct.
What would be the date and time on the HP when that was last accessed?
Looking at all the records in what I have here in this exhibit. The first four records contain last access dates on January 31st, 2010. Oh, I'm sorry, the first three records. Record 4 contains a last access date of February 8th, 2010.
And that February 8th, 2010, does it have a time associated with it?
Yes, it does.
And what is that?
2:08 a.m.
To it? Around the same time that we saw for the e-machine, correct?
Correct.
That same time frame, 206, 207, 208?
Correct.
Okay. And that's AM, correct?
Yes, it is.
All right. Now, does it appear that the 208 access was a site called msn.com, is that correct?
Yes.
And that, in 2010, that was a common opening page. Would you agree, in 2010, MSN?
Yes, it was.
Okay, so does that activity there suggest that all that was done on the HP was that the computer was booted up to its opening page? Is that what that activity would suggest?
I wouldn't say the computer was booted up, but the application could have been opened. The Internet Explorer could have been opened, which was presented with that page, yes.
Okay, and there's no following searches like we saw on the e-machine, correct? That you were able to identify?
None are identified in the exhibit I'm looking at now.
Okay. But still, we have somebody sitting at the computer or nearby the computer, physically doing activity with that computer.
Yes, that would suggest that the browser was open.
Okay, thank you. Take these. The fact that the two desktop computers that were recovered from the McStay residence were accessed on February 8th. Was that a discussion that you had with any of the detectives or anybody involved in the investigation?
Objection relevant.
Overruled, yes.
I believe that date was inclusive in the time frame requested, but I don't remember any specific conversations at the time I did the examination.
Did you point out to any of the detectives that there was actually user activity on February 8th on these computers that were recovered from the McStay residence?
Did I point that out to them? No, I prepared the reports and provided them with the reports to review.
Okay. So when you did it, February 8th didn't have any significant meaning for you as in terms of what your work was, is that correct?
That is correct.
And I'm going to just stay on the device number 5, which would be the HP. On that, let's see. Well, before I ask you about that, were you familiar with the FBI's regional computer forensic lab reports that were done on the same machines that you did your reports on?
No, I was not.
Okay. So you never looked at those?
Not that I recall, no.
And were you aware that the FBI had done their own examinations of those devices? Were you even aware of that fact?
Not that I recall, no.
On the HP desktop computer, and regarding that report that you did, there were some searches done on January 27th that were highlighted in your report. Is that accurate?
I don't recall highlighting any items.
Listed, I should say. Internet activity.
Yes.
Okay. On January 27th, were there sites that were accessed that had to do with passports, travel to Mexico, things of that nature?
I don't remember the specific date, but yes, there could have that.
If you could just take a look at your report, that would refresh your recollection. And by the way, you have the longest reports. Like, your reports are thousands of pages, so I'm not going to bring up the whole report. I took snippets,
Yes, we realize that.
and I'll give you a hint. I highlighted some of the ones that
I do see the index numbers 172 and 174 are highlighted.
Okay.
172 indicates a search on Google.com for the requirements for entering Mexico, which was conducted or last accessed on January 27th, 2010 at 4:46 p.m. The next highlighted item, index number 174, was a visit to gomexico.about.com with the last access date and time of January 27th, 2010 at 4:47 p.m. The next highlighted item, index number 184, was a visit again to gomexico.about.com on January 27th, 2010 at 4:49 p.m. Index number 185 reflects the same information.
We're still on January 27th. These are all searches on January 27th, correct?
Correct. Index number 187 reflects the same information, January 27th at 4:49 p.m. Index number 238 was another search at google.com. I'm sorry, for age requirements for entering Mexico on last access January 27th at 4:46 p.m. Index number 240. GoMexico.about.com was accessed on January 27th at 4:47 p.m. Index number 250. Again, reflects a visit to GoMexico.about.com on January 27th at 4:49 p.m. Index number 251 reflects a visit to GoMexico.about.com on January 27th at 4:49 p.m. And the last highlighted item in this exhibit, index number 253, was a visit to GoMexico.about.com on January 27th, 2010 at 4:49 p.m.
Now, those searches that were done on the HP device number 5 desktop computer in the McStay residence, was that, those are, would it be safe to say that those searches occurred between about 4:30 and 5 on January 27th, approximately?
Yes.
Okay. And those sites, you're probably not individually familiar with each one of those sites, but would it be safe to say that those are informational type sites on passport requirements and travel to Mexico?
Objection, last foundation.
Overruled, the financial express and opinion.
I don't specifically know what information can be attained from about.com.
I'm going to show you Exhibit 848B. That should coincide with one of the searches that you mentioned there. If you could take a look at 848B and tell me whether or not, and you can see at the top left, it's a site that was accessed for about.com.
Yes.
And does that appear to be a site that is where the inquiry is about travel information for kids and documents that are required for kids to go to Mexico?
Yes.
Okay. And I'll show you 848C. Same thing. That would be a site that would be used for information on general entry requirements into Mexico.
Yes.
And 848D, that would also be from about.com, and that would be a site that would be a site where somebody's asking for information about children travel and children requirements to get into Mexico.
Objection, last foundation.
Overruled, the financial express and opinion.
Yes, it does.
And again, 848E, about.com site, general passport information, whether one is needed or not for Mexico. Is that what that site reflects?
Yes.
And then last one, 848F, that's also a general search for requirements for entry into Mexico.
Yes, that appears to have search on Google.
And you indicated that you have not seen the Regional Computer Forensic Lab report, correct?
I have not.
Okay. Let's take these back.
Were you aware, should I call you Corporal Schroeder or Detective Schroeder?
Detective is fine.
Okay. Detective Schroeder, were you aware that in this investigation there was a video of a family that was walking across the
Objection,
border.
relevance.
What's the objection?
Relevance.
Overruled on that ground, but sustained as beyond the scope of direct examination.
Did you have information when you did your work that there was some discussion about the McStay family crossing over the border into
Objection.
Mexico?
See the scope.
Overruled, Nancy.
Yes, I was aware.
And when you found these items on the search for January 27th on the HP, did you give that information to the detectives? Or did you highlight that to any of the detectives?
I don't recall specifically. Unfortunately, I don't have a copy of that report. If it had fallen within the time frame of the data requested, then yes, it would have been in my report.
Okay, I know about your report. I'm talking about, did you have a discussion with any of the detectives about that internet activity that you and I just went over?
No.
Okay, on the E-machine, device number 4, you said a majority of your, I think your testimony is all of the work you did on the E-machine had to do with internet activity, is that correct?
Yes, internet activity and installed applications.
I'm going to show you Exhibit 846. And tell me, Jim, you can let me know if is something you recognize.
I see.
846A. Again, this is 846A. If you can take a look at that, Detective Schroeder, and tell me if you recognize that document. If I could just give you a hint, if you could look at the source path of that as well, and see if that refreshes your memory, or whether you know what it is.
This is a report in reference to a file name BOS_Dan BMW.doc.
Okay?
Has the title of Joseph B. It was located in a file path suggesting the evidence file was located on an N drive.
What drive?
N, as
Thank
in
you.
Nancy. In a folder called Merit/EV with the folder name indicating the T number and investigator from our lab that the files were saved in.
Well, instead
Referencing
of
device 4.
okay, so this would be a document that was looked at by your team, or maybe even you, is that correct?
Objection, lacks foundation.
Overruled, Nancy, unanimous.
No,
Okay. So when but you see your name there, correct?
I do.
And so what would that mean? How did your name get on that report?
The information was contained within a file with my name in it. As part of our archiving cases, we use a T number and the examiner's last name, and all the information for that case is stored in that folder.
Would this be a document that was, well, it was at least indexed by your team, is that correct?
I'm not sure what you mean by index.
Well, it was made note of and recorded in some fashion and given a, I guess, or stored in a particular file name.
let me ask you, this is a document that was identified by your team, is that correct?
This report was not generated by me. If this document was located in that folder and came from,
Searching, speculating at this point.
Well, we will. Go ahead.
and came from a exact copy of what was provided to this examiner, I can't see the full path of this file, so I don't know if we're looking at something that was obtained from the evidence file, because again, the evidence file contains everything from that hard drive. So if somebody else were to dig around in that evidence file, of course, they would find all the documents that were contained in that device.
Would it be safe to say, you can turn the page, it's okay. Would it be safe to say that this is a document that you've never seen before?
Yes.
And would this also say that this is a document that was on the e-machine desktop computer?
The source path would suggest that. However, there's not enough information for me to be able to tell where this came from.
Okay, but at least the source path would indicate that it came from the e-machine, correct?
It does suggest that, yes.
Okay, and you did indicate that for the e-machine that you concentrated mainly on the internet activity, correct?
Yes.
So if there was other stuff on the e-machine, documents, for example, that would not be stuff that you concentrated on, correct?
Correct.
I'm going to show you exhibit 845.
Can I see it?
It's the same type of thing from the last one. This is a document. Would this also suggest that this came from the e-machine, this document, the source path?
It suggests that, yes.
Okay. And this is, again, a document that has a name of Dan Payoff?
Yes, it was an Excel spreadsheet.
Okay. So even though, let's say, for example, you didn't concentrate on other stuff, just mainly internet activity, and this is not internet activity, is it?
No, it's not.
Okay. But other folks could go into the computer and maybe concentrate on documents or other stuff and come up with some files that were not in your report, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Does that have a file creation date? Would you be able to know when that document was created?
This report indicates the file was created
Searching
on.
hearsay, Lex Foundation.
This report suggests the file was created on February 19th, 2009 at 6:22 p.m.
Thank you.
We talked a little bit about, on Thursday, when we testified about these exhibits, 829 and 828.
Do you recall these documents? I'm getting a good workout here, so. These were the documents that I believe you testified too that were accessed on the e-machine, is that correct?
Yes.
And these documents, can you just, for refreshing all of our memories, what were those documents?
These were cached web pages.
Okay, the cache web pages, and where did they come from?
From the internet cache.
Okay, was it as a result of a particular search, or the result of going to a particular website or anything like that?
It was a result of going to intuit.com.
Okay.
I'm sorry, into where?
Intuit?
Thank you.
And I think you testified that one of the documents, 828, was a print check setup. Is that correct?
I don't recall indicating that, but that does appear to be what we're looking at.
Okay. And it's, just to be clear, it's not a check, correct?
That is correct, yes.
And you were not able to tell whether or not that document was ever turned into a check. Is that correct? Like, it didn't, you weren't able to tell whether or not it was sent to a printer and printed out. Is that accurate?
Correct.
And I think you indicated that you didn't retrieve the printer's spool information. Is that correct?
I have reviewed the spool information from that computer.
Oh, as of Thursday or as since Thursday?
I've reviewed that portion of it since Thursday.
Okay, so on Thursday when we were talking about it, you hadn't looked at the printer spool information. Is that correct?
It states the evidence we talked about it on Thursday.
Can you restate your question, please?
When you testified on Thursday and I asked you about the printer information, you had indicated you had not looked at the printer spool information. Is that correct?
Correct.
Since then, you did look at it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Did you gain any information about that, what we're looking at on Exhibit 828, the print check setup?
No, I did not.
Okay. So still to this day, you don't know, or you don't have any information that that was actually turned into a check that was printed out. Is that accurate?
That is accurate.
Okay. What about for Exhibit 829, which is, do you know what that is?
Again, that's a cached webpage from intuit.com, which appears to be a blank check.
Okay. Do you know if that eventually made its way to a printer and into a check?
I did not locate anything that would indicate that specifically that this check was printed from the spool files.
Okay. Since you did look at the spool files for the e-machine since Thursday, was there any check printed out at all on the e-machine that on February 4th?
The information I was able to ascertain from the spool files, I wasn't able to identify what was printed.
Was anything printed?
There were two documents sent to the printer, yes. Whether or not it actually printed, I don't know.
Okay. So, again, my question, do you have any information that anything was printed out on February 4th by looking at the printer's spool?
I have information that 2 jobs were sent to the printer, yes.
Okay. Is there, if you send something to the printer spool, do you automatically assume it got printed? Wouldn't the printer spool say something like it's been printed and not just waiting in a queue to be printed?
That I'm not sure. I have to research that.
So when something is sent to a printer spool and it's in a printer queue, am I using the right language?
Yes.
Okay. If it actually gets printed, does it say something else?
Yes. At the time that it's printed, the user will see a message whether or not it printed. I don't know from the spool file, and I didn't look that far in depth to be able to determine whether or not I can say yes or no that it printed.
Okay. So let me ask you this. Did you have any evidence that anything in the printer spool was ever printed out?
Were you able to look at a device that you labeled number 1? Were you able to do a report on that device as well?
Yes, I did.
To your, what was device number 1?
I don't
As you
recall.
understood it. Show you exhibit 853. I guess 853B. There we go.
While he's looking at that, ask you about, were you ever able to find any evidence that, of a computer by the name of Giuseppe Lap? Which would have been Joseph's laptop computer. Did you ever find any evidence that that computer existed?
I don't recall from memory.
Do you know whether or not you examined or did a report on any laptop computer belonging to Joseph?
I don't recall specifically belonging to Joseph.
At the time that you did your work in this case, and I know I asked you about the FBI report, the regional computer forensic lab reports that were done, did you know they even existed at the time that you did your examination?
I did not.
This is 853B. Do you know what that is?
This is a report that I prepared.
And is that, does that pertain to what you labeled device number 1?
Yes, this was the only device processed at that time.
Did you identify what the device was?
Yes, I identified it as a Asus laptop.
Did you have an owner's name?
I'm sorry?
There was an objection by Mr. Dougherty on a request to approach.
Okay. Council approach was recorded. All right, the last objection is sustained on the grounds of beyond the scope of direct examination, called for hearsay and emergency at this time.
Okay, this is the last area that I'm going to get into with you, and then I'm going to be done. On Thursday, you testified about some activity on February 5th. Do you recall that?
Yes.
So I'm going to show you exhibit 838.
What's that number?
838. Was this the exhibit that you testified about on Thursday?
Yes, it does appear to be one of the exhibits I testified to.
And you indicated that, and what was the time of, you gave a, it was a bookmark and you gave a time of last access, is that correct?
Yes.
And what was that?
The date and time of the last access on that bookmark was February 5th at 6:16 p.m.
Which device was that?
This would have been device 4.
The e-machine, correct?
Yes.
So in other words, what you were conveying to the jury and through your testimony was that somebody actually sat at the e-machine on February 5th and conducted this bookmark. Is that correct?
Overruled.
Yes.
You indicated it was user activity as opposed to system activity. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So, but now, were you sure of that? Is that something that you looked at independently? Because hypothetically, if it was part of, let's say, 27,000 files that were accessed at about the same time, would that indicate that it might be system activity?
If that many files were accessed at the exact same time, that could suggest that, yes.
Did you see what other files were accessed at that time that bookmark was created?
At the time the bookmark was accessed, I don't recall identifying additional files
Did you
on
look?
that date and time.
Did you look?
Not that I recall specifically.
I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you this document, and you can tell me if you recognize it and know what it represents. This might be a better copy for you. You can look at either one.
For the record, Exhibit 847, I believe.
Exhibit 847.
Can I see it?
I was afraid he was going to say that, so you can just look at mine, and you can look at the same thing. But yes, you can see it.
This is not a report that I generated.
I understand. My question is, do you know what that report represents?
The report is entitled,
Objection, hearsay. Latch Foundation.
Sustained.
That's true. That's not. I'm asking you if you know what that report is representing.
Objection. See?
Sustained.
Are there reports done that you're aware of that would list system activity on a computer?
after looking at the report, I see it.
Objection. Hearsay and Latch Foundation. It's non-responsive also.
Sustained.
Did any one of your reports or any work that you did that we can look at that would tell us all of the files that were accessed around that time on February 5th?
I did not create a timeline report, no.
Okay, so we wouldn't be able to look at your report, right, to determine what other system activity occurred on February 5th. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Do you remember what system activity occurred on February 5th on the E-machine?
No.
Okay. Does that report that I just put in front of you, does that refresh your recollection as to what system activity occurred on February 5th on the E-machine?
I did not look at that information.
You didn't look at it at all?
No.
So how did you create this particular bookmark on February 5th? Or did the DA give that to you?
Objection. Argumentative and misstates his testimony that it was created by him.
Sustained.
How did you testify? You said you were familiar with Exhibit 838, correct?
Yes.
How were you familiar with it?
That was extracted from the report that I created.
Okay, so you had to look at some activity on the 5th, correct?
Yes, I looked at the internet activity.
Okay, and that's it?
Yes.
Okay. So you looked at all the internet activity, correct? For the E-machine on February 5th?
Did I look at every single record that was exported out in the report within that time frame? No.
Detective Schroeder, I'm not asking, of course you didn't look at every single one. But what I'm asking is, did you generally look at the activity on February 5th?
Did I see files that were accessed on February 5th within the internet activity? Yes.
I'm going to show you and see if this is, since we don't have a report of system activity for February 5th from you, I want you to take a look and see if this refreshes your memory in this report. It has a little star next to it, okay? but does that refresh your memory as to this bookmark that is in Exhibit 838?
I'm going to object as the foundation. He says he didn't look at it, so there's nothing to refresh, therefore he has no personal knowledge.
Call the roll.
Is there a particular item that I'm,
Yeah, if you could look at on the bookmark that the people showed you, it would have this particular bookmark would have a created date, a written date, an access date, and a modified date. Is that correct?
yes,
Okay, and that came from system activity for the e-machine on February 5th, correct?
Objection, misstates the testimony and assumes facts not evidence that it was system activity.
Call the roll. The question was, is that correct? You can answer.
I apologize. Can you clarify the question?
Sure. You testified that you are familiar with Exhibit 838, correct?
Yes,
And 838 is, for lack of a better word, a snippet of activity on the e-machine for February 5th. Is that right?
yes,
That snippet may be an isolated event, or that snippet may be a part of some other type of scan or system activity, correct?
that is possible.
Okay, so, and that would make a difference, because if it's part of a scan of some sort, it would suggest that somebody wasn't at the computer, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that's what the questioning is about. So since you didn't do a report indicating all system activity or computer activity on February 5th, I'm wondering, and I'm asking you, as to Exhibit 838, if we could possibly determine whether it's system activity or user activity. You with me so far?
Yes,
Okay, so in the bookmark that the people provided to you, you have a created date for this bookmark, a written date, an access date, and a modified date, correct?
correct.
And that has a date and time, correct?
It does.
Okay, so if you could look at the report that I gave you and see whether or not that would refresh your memory as to whether or not it is part of a scan of some sort, or is it actually user activity? Because in this, the report that I gave you does have columns that indicate
Objection,
the created...
counsel, and counsel testifying.
Well, take a look at it and see if it refreshes your memory.
I did not look at the timeline, a timeline view through NCASE on this device. I did not create a timeline report. This report appears that it was created through NCASE, possibly on
I'm
this
sorry,
device.
through what?
Through NCASE, possibly for the device we're speaking about.
Okay. Now, if you looked at the highlighted item on the report that I gave you, and it matched exactly with the bookmark that the people showed you in Exhibit 838, would that be indicative of, would that be a fair representation of that activity as it pertains to the e-machine?
Through the file name from the full path identified in this report, and the dates and times associated with that file, it does appear to be consistent with the file that was presented.
Thank you. And in the report that I had you refresh your memory with, does this report show you that that bookmark is part of a scan of
Objection
files?
calls for hearsay, lacks foundation.
Sustained.
Hypothetically, if this bookmark came from files that were 27,000 files that were accessed at or about the same time, would that indicate to you that it was part of some type of scan or system activity that would be non-user related?
Yes, that would indicate that.
Okay. And you didn't do that, right? You didn't check to see whether it came from that type of scan or whether it was actually an independent event.
Correct.
Okay. Nothing further.
What item was bookmarked?
I'm sorry.
Exhibit 838?
Yes. The item that was bookmarked on February the 5th, what item or file or site was that?
The index file number was 158.
Okay, what was that?
This was a bookmark through Internet Explorer.
I mean, was there a particular site or file that was bookmarked?
I think he's referring to whether it's the free credit report, Quicken. This was a free
Yes.
credit report.
Well, one of the witness answer.
Sure.
Yes, this was a bookmark to the free credit report and score page on Quicken.com.
Okay, thank you.
And if I do have another question, if you were able to look at the end-case report, let's say we were to take a break and you were able to look at the end-case report and find that, would you be able to then have an opinion as to whether or not this bookmark is part of a scan or is independent user activity?
Not in a brief amount of time.
What's brief? I mean, if we took a break and you looked at the, if you looked at the end-case report, and you know what end-case is, you testified to it on Thursday, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so if you looked at the end-case report, would that help you at least form an opinion?
I don't recall how many thousands of records there were. They were not sorted in a date and time, by date and time, so
Well, what if we guide you? We'll guide you there. How long, would you be able to form an opinion if you were able to look at the in-case report regarding that bookmark?
possibly.
Your Honor, with court's permission, we take our morning break at this point?
Sure, we'll go ahead and take our morning recess at 7:15 minutes. Keep in mind the admonitions previously given to you, not to form or express any opinions about the case, not to discuss the case, and we'll see you back in about 15 minutes.